Welcome to another episode of the Assemble Performance Podcast. Today we're talking about a concept that I really enjoy talking about. It's a concept in exercise science known as progressive overload. As I say often with these things, I'm going to keep it at a higher level and not going to get too sciencey. That way you have what you need to go out and put this stuff into practice without being too caught up on the theory. Again, I always say this to remind myself because I know I will nerd out and just talk about the physiology forever, but I want to give you value and not bore you with the details. And I trust that those of you that agree with how nerdy I am will enjoy the research or just send me a message and we can nerd out about it in voice notes or something. I introduced this concept of progressive overload last week a little bit, and today we're going to really go more in the weeds on what it is and how it looks in hypertraining and why it even matters. If you've heard of progressive overload before, then this will be a fun recap and probably give you some good new information unless you're very versed in exercise science and physiology. Otherwise, if you've never heard of it, this is a good episode to listen to because it's important for your training. It's critical and needed in your training. So definitely listen. And then at the end, I've got a cool announcement that I'm going to be putting out. And so definitely listen to that because, it's pretty cool. Something really exciting that I've been working on. And I'm not announcing it here, but I'm going to give you more details on when it's going to be announced and how to be the first to hear about it. So progressive overload, what is it if you've never heard of it? It's the principle that your body adapts to the demands you place on it. You need to gradually and systematically increase the stress on your body, on your energy systems, on your body systems, so that your body has a reason to adapt. It's important to understand, like, if you get stronger, when you get faster, that happens because your body thinks it needs to survive, which we'll talk about in a minute. But if you're going to run the same pace and distance for weeks on end, it's going to be hard at first, but it will get easier. And then if you still go out for that same 30-minute, 60-minute run at the same pace, eventually it's not going to drive really any further adaptation. So you need to be increasing the distance, the speed, the amount of running sessions in order to continue to push those adaptations. And the same thing goes for lifting weights. You need to increase the weight you use, how many reps you're doing, how many times you're going to the gym, something. Otherwise, say you bench 135 pounds, it might say it's hard at first. If you're still benching 135 pounds for sets of 5 as you were before, and it's easier in 8 months, your body's adapted, but eventually you're going to stop giving yourself enough stimulus to drive an adaptation. So this ability, this concept of progressive overload drives progress, but does it in a way that doesn't burn you out and continues to push progress for the foreseeable future, well into the future, without putting you in a hole. So this concept I'm about to share with you, I believe it was from Cal Dietz in his book, Triphasic Training. Don't quote me on that, though. I could be wrong. I've read a lot of books on training methodologies, but I'm pretty sure it was Cal Dietz in Triphasic Training. I didn't have a chance to go verify because I couldn't find the book. I couldn't dig it up. We've moved a lot, but his idea, this is generally the idea of progressive overload, but he says it in a way that's kind of very visceral. The body is only going to adapt if it's forced to. Take a step back. This is not a literal quote. This is the idea that I remember from the book. The body is only going to adapt if it's forced to. You have to push your body to the edge where your body thinks it's going to die for real adaptation to occur. Again, it's important to remember that you put more muscle on, you get stronger because your body doesn't know you're lifting weights in a safe gym. It thinks you're lifting a boulder or a log off of you to survive or something like that. Same thing when you run. Your body doesn't get faster because it's like, oh, we're going out for a fun run. Your body might as well think that you're chasing something to go eat or you're being chased by a predator and you need to survive. So your body is going to adapt because it thinks it needs to survive. That's the basis of homeostasis, of progression, of physiology, and of why we live nowadays. Cal Dietz, again, don't quote me on if this was him, but I think it was him in his book. He said that his goal with his athletes when he worked in college, does Cal Dietz still work in college? I should have done more up-to-date research on this, but at the time, or whoever this was in their book, they said that their goal was to make their athletes slightly sick going into winter break, having sniffles, kind of feeling run down because they're about to take winter break off and recover. and they always PR'd when they came back. This is an idea called supercompensation. I'm not going to go super in the weeds, but you can look up graphs. If you're on YouTube watching this, you can see that like I'm going to really not do a good job, but like you push an athlete down and down and down. I guess I'll do it this way because this is potentially the way you're looking at it. Down and down and down. With training, you're kind of breaking them down more and more, and then they take this time off and they recover and they supercompensate, and in this way, your baseline fitness is raised well above where it was before. You can look it up. I'm not going to go too in the weeds, but this all leads into the point that recovery is important for that adaptation to occur. So progressive overload, graphs are up and down like I just kind of shared. They're cycles of training and recovery. So yes, you need to push the weights, the reps, the paces, but then you need to recover from that adequately in order to adapt. Because those adaptations that happen only happen when you are recovering. They don't happen during the training. Now, progressive overload, it matters because without progressive overload, you're going to plateau, like I shared already. If you do it wrong, you're either going to see no progress because you're not pushing yourself enough, or you're going to push yourself too hard and you're going to get injured or burn out. So it's important not to plateau. It's also important to do it right. Because if you do it right, you're going to see sustainable progress, sustainable gains, and you're going to build resilience and capacity as you just continue to get fitter and fitter. For example, I had a client recently, Adam, who was stuck at the same running pace for years. He's run for a long time, but he was stuck at the same pace. And we introduced a solid progressive overload progression in his running and strength training. And just in the first 9 weeks of working together, so just over 2 months, really 2 months because we did an assessment week. So in 8 weeks of training with one assessment week, we were able to drop 46 seconds per mile on his zone 2 run in that 9 weeks. And that was while increasing the distance of his zone 2 run by almost 5.5 miles. So his first assessment was a 30-minute zone 2 assessment, and he did that at a 12-minute something pace. And then 9 weeks later, we did a run that was 5.5 miles longer than his previous 30-minute run that he did. And he did that in, I think it was a 90-minute run that we did, and that ended up being 5.5 miles longer. And his zone 2 pace, his conversational pace, was 46 seconds faster per mile, and his heart rate was lower by an average of 7 beats per minute. So this goes to show Adam had run for a long time, but he wasn't progressing his running in a way that was going to make him fitter. And so by introducing a solid progression plan with progressive overload in his running, he was able to really improve his aerobic fitness, his running fitness. Same thing happens for strength. I've had a lot of clients that come to me and they haven't progressed their strength in years, and we just introduce a pretty simple, I would say, not easy, but simple progression plan for them with their training, and their numbers skyrocket. So skyrocket, such a marketing word. Sorry, using such marketing words. Yeah, progressive overload, how does it look in hybrid training? Because this is a really critical piece for hybrid athletes because it's a little bit different than regular everyday training. So with regular strength training, we might just be looking at adding weight or adding volume, changing rep schemes throughout the training cycle. With running, we might just be looking at adding miles and speeding up our paces, trying out different speed work intervals, and then you kind of peak with running. You peak kind of at a certain volume and intensity before your race or event, and then you taper into the race or event. You keep your intensity, you drop your volume. That's generally how it works. Those are pretty typical overload progression plans for strength and endurance. But for hybrid training, we need to combine both. So how do we combine both? With everything, but especially with hybrid training, recovery becomes the biggest limiting factor. Because again, that adaptation only happens when you're recovering. We cannot just add volume or intensity every single week to running and lifting. We're not going to recover enough. So what can we do? There's multiple methods to progress you as an athlete, as a client. The biggest thing with hybrid training is not thinking of strength and endurance differently, but thinking of you as the whole athlete, as the whole client. How do we progress you holistically? Strength and endurance and just overall everything else. So this might look like increasing your miles or paces while holding strength steady. So you might not need as much strength progress as you need running progress for your specific goals. And so we can hold your strength, volume, and intensity pretty steady for a few weeks while we increase your running. That gives you more ability to recover from the more aggressive running progression while holding your strength. And that progresses you as a holistic client. Somebody who's not used to thinking of themselves holistically like this might think that they're losing strength or they're not progressing their strength, but they really are. because by holding the same amount of strength every week while you increase your running performance and your running distances and your overall stress outside of strength training, you're actually showing that you're fitter because you can lift the same weights with less recovery because you are doing more running. On the flip side, we could increase the weight or reps that we do in the gym while we hold the run volume and intensity very steady. So same story, just as before, just flipped. Another thing we could do, if you've listened to the previous episodes, you know that I'm big on the concept Alex Viada introduced. I'm not going to take credit for it, but of consolidating these stressors of what intensity level exercise is and what stressors it has on our nervous system. So we can increase intensity in the gym and in our running speed work at the same time while we hold our volume steady, because these are similar stressors on the body, similar energy systems. On the flip side, again, we could increase volume in the gym and add volume like miles to our running plan at the same time while holding intensity in the gym and speed intensity running steady, because these are similar energy systems. So we can progress the similar stressors while holding other stressors the same. Another thing that people do not celebrate enough and do not take enough credit for is holding performance the same in the midst of a lot of life stress. Last night, let me look. I put it on Instagram actually because my son slept horrible. I don't know what it was. We slept horrible. Last night I slept 3 hours and 45 minutes and per my Oura Ring. And Oura Rings are pretty good at tracking sleep. And so if I was to go out and do the same run that I did last week and do the same exact performance as I did last week, some people might be bummed because it's the same performance. Hell, honestly, with that little sleep, what if I ran 30 seconds per mile slower than last week on the same run? People would get frustrated because they would say, oh my gosh, like I got slower, like my training's not working. But when you take into account the life stress, you realize that even a little bit slower per mile, I still performed better given the conditions that I started with than last week. Because last week I slept great. I woke up, I had a great cup of coffee, I had great breakfast and just went out. Everything was firing on all cylinders. And so you have to realize that performing a little bit worse in way worse conditions is still a progression, is still showing that you're fitter, because your performance given the conditions should have been worse than they were, but they weren't, because your performance and your ability has increased. Hopefully that lands with you. So how do I coach progression differently than other coaches? This is very important to me. This is a huge, huge point. I don't just track the sets, the reps, and the intensity. Like I just explained, I don't just track those things. I also monitor fatigue, emotional state through check-ins. If you listened the last few episodes, I explained in one of them my check-in process, and I've explained before my check-in process. So I monitor fatigue, emotional state, athlete readiness, heart rate variability, and resting heart rate and stuff if you have a smartwatch device that syncs with Training Peaks so that I can see that, or if you send it to me. And I track performance trends over days and weeks, not just one trend. If your performance is down one day, but then it recovers, then there was probably something that day you didn't realize that was impacting you, and that's fine. I track all of that, and I program the best progression model or a combination of different progression models based on what you need and what we find works best for you over time as we continue to train and hone in on how your body responds to training. I don't push you harder week to week if your body's not ready for it. But if you are ready, I will push you. And so sometimes I'm holding clients back because they want to push harder than they should be at that moment. Sometimes I'm pushing them more than they want to be. A lot of the time we meet each other. I explain my thought process and they really understand it. And sometimes, honestly, if a client wants to push and I don't think they should push, but they're really adamant, I will say, okay, let's do it and see what happens, because you live in your body. You understand your body better than I can. Yeah, I understand like physiologically, scientifically, and coaching wise, maybe more about your body than you do, but you've lived in your body and you understand how it feels. So I do trust the client a lot on that because you are the expert on you. No matter how much education I have or anything, like I will never be as much of an expert on you as you are because you've lived in your body your whole life. So again, most coaches, they miss the holistic human side of progressive overload. You're not just numbers on a spreadsheet. You're human with complex emotions, with outside stressors, with other things that are important to you that all contribute and impact your recovery and your performance. So yes, I have spreadsheets. Yes, I'm a nerd. Yes, I have all this data. but there's a lot of magic, for lack of a better word. I mean, there is a better word, but I'm reading a book now called Alchemy, really good. But there's a lot of magic, a lot of things outside of just the numbers that make you you. They're important. And if we only think logically about the numbers, we're going to miss so much about the human. That's going to be a superpower, honestly. The inspirational stories of athletes and things like that. If an athlete runs a marathon, right, and they have trained perfectly, it's all basically been perfect, like on a spreadsheet, and nothing's gone wrong. That's not very inspirational. That's cool, good for them. They worked hard, but nobody really cares. But if somebody overcomes a lot of adversity, their training's not perfect, their spreadsheet's not perfect, that's inspiring. Think about Rocky, right? Which Rocky movie was it where he fights the Russian, and the Russian is in the lab doing all the cool, nerdy things in the lab, and Rocky's in there hitting is it Rocky Balboa? Is it just Rocky Balboa? He's in there hitting the meat in the meat lockers and training in the barn, right? That's inspirational. That's obviously, it's a movie, so it's sensationalized, but it's true. It hits at human emotion. It hits on the real powerful things in training and in our goals, which is your mind. So you're not just a human. Yes, the numbers are important. Yes, we can use the data, but it would be so reductionistic to just bring you down to numbers on a spreadsheet. And that's why I'm so adamant as a coach about putting that extra time in to get to know you, to build that relationship, to learn those things about you, and also to further my own education in those ways, to take certifications on mindset, to listen to psychology PhDs and coaches and clinicians and therapists, and really understand the whole human more than just going to a course and understanding a new progression model. Those are important, and I love them, and they're nerdy, but at the end of the day, what makes the most progress for you as a client, what makes you better? And it's the intangibles. It's the emotional side. It's the mental side. It's the human side. So that's what I am very passionate about. Now, I told you I would share with you a cool announcement. I'm going to do that before I get into kind of the wrap up of everything we've talked about. First, if you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to leave a rating and review. I say this every episode, but it helps me reach more people like you and helps the podcast grow. So definitely leave a rating and review. Eventually, I'm going to, maybe soon, honestly, I've been thinking about it for a while, do free giveaways for random reviewers. So by leaving a review, you will get yourself on that list to get whatever I decide to give away, whether it's like a free month of coaching, a free whatever. I got a lot of ideas, so I'm not going to promise anything right now. And if the way that I coach has resonated with you, you have two options here. You could click the link in the description to set up a free consult call to learn more about what this would look like for your specific circumstances. Or you can click the second link in the description to join my mailing list if you haven't yet, because I'm building something really awesome for you right now. I'm working really hard on it, putting a lot of time and effort into it that you're not going to want to miss. And that's primarily only going to go out to my email list. It's going to go live. I'm not going to say a date because it may change, but I have a date in mind. It's going to be soon. I will let you know when it is. If you're on the mailing list, you will get first access. You will get the most up-to-date information. And again, I love my email list. If you're on my email list, you know I send out 3 emails a week, 1 podcast recap, and then 2 additional emails per week. I'm focused on value. I don't sell your information. I don't do anything like that. And you can unsubscribe at any time. There's nothing holding you there. There's a real easy unsubscribe button at the bottom of every email. So you are not going to be trapped on some spammy email list. I'm giving real information, but definitely if you're interested in this awesome announcement that I have, it's going to come soon. It's going to come by the time this podcast posts. It will come in a few weeks at the most. So subscribe to the mailing list. And then if you hear the announcement and for some reason you're not interested, you can always unsubscribe if you don't want to stay on it. But I'm really excited about this announcement. I'm putting a lot of effort into it, working with a lot of different people, and it's going to be huge. It's going to be very valuable for you at a very, very affordable price. And yeah, very excited. So stay tuned for that. Now, to kind of wrap up all those points we've talked about, progressive overload is crucial to drive progress in training, but it needs to be done correctly so that you don't cause an injury, burnout, or plateau. Hybrid training requires a more holistic approach to progressive overload since there's a lot of different things going on at the same time. And it is my sincere, to my core belief that A lot of coaches focus too much on the numbers and not enough on the human. They're all important, and I strive to understand both of them and how they relate to each other and what they can teach me about you and how you're responding to training and overall valuing your goals and how they're adding to your life. So that is my stance on progressive overload on coaching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Next episode, I think, is going to be the episode around. No, it's not. Never mind. But the next 2 episodes, I am going to dive more into progressive overload specifically for running and strength training. So stay tuned for those. Make sure you're subscribed so you get to hear those, because I'm going to take these concepts we've just introduced and explain specifically what they look like in hybrid training if you're running, and then if you're strength training within the hybrid training methodology. So stay tuned for those, and I will see you in the next episode of the Assemble Performance Podcast.